This is Ask Joe number 186, the Joe Gilder on the Radio edition.
The 615 new local artist of the week, Joe Gilder there with Lies. Check him out this Friday afternoon live, Soulshine Pizza Factory. He'll hit the stage just after 7. I'm out there from 5 until 7 playing games, giving away concert tickets. It's going to be
Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Welcome to this extended intro version of the Home Studio Corner podcast, aka Ask Joe. This week is a fun week because this week we have a local independent radio station here in Nashville called Lightning 100. And as it turns out, I've mentioned this before, but this is the week where I am the local artist of the week on Lightning 100, which means they're playing my song on the radio several times throughout the week, and then on Friday there's a free show downtown Nashville, 7 p.m. Soulshine Pizza if you're in the area, where me and my lovely bandmates will be playing a show. So it's exciting. Always fun to hear your song on the radio. That was a video, audio from a video where we were in the car as a family. We were heading to Lowe's to get some boring house stuff, but they did their local show where they play local artists, and I was the featured artist, and they played me first. So I captured it on the radio or on video, which is kind of a fun moment. It's the only second time I've ever had anything on the radio, so that's fun. What's cool about that whole story is Adam Culver, who is the DJ who invited me to be the artist of the week. He has been a longtime Home Studio Corner fan, so he's a fan of Home Studio Corner and the Simply Recording podcast, which is how we ever got connected. So really, literally, Home Studio Corner is the reason I'm the local artist of the week, which is kind of a fun thing because it gets at something that I've talked about before of how anyone you talk to that does anything interesting that you might think you want to do, chances are it didn't come the way you thought it would come, and it probably didn't come the way they thought it would. You tend to think, I just have to send my music to the station and they will pick me. And I'm sure that happens sometimes, but more often than not, how many people do you know that apply for a job, but the only reason they end up getting the job is because they know a friend of a friend who works there, who put in a good word, had the HR person pull their resume, and they got the job or got an interview. I've had that happen to me. It's happened to my wife. That's kind of real life. As much as it'd be nice to just submit an application and get the job, sometimes that doesn't happen. Now, I will say that did happen with Sweetwater. It turns out they were just hiring like crazy and would take a warm body, it seems. Anyway, that's initially I want to play it off as, well, it wasn't just because I'm an artist. It's because I have Home Studio Corner, and that's why he picked me. So I'm not really the real deal. And that's such a dumb way of looking at it, right? Because so cool, I built up this thing that actually had value and gave him value, and that's how we connected. Cool, right? It doesn't have to be a certain way for it to be cool and to enjoy it. So I'm trying to spend this week, I'm trying to enjoy it. I'm not expecting huge things to happen from this 1 week of getting my song on the radio a couple of times, but it's fun. I have friends texting me, hey, I just heard you on the radio. Is that you? So anyway, put yourself out there. Sorry for all the coughing. The point being, the lesson today is simply put yourself out there and see what happens. I guarantee I would not have gotten on the radio if I hadn't put myself out there. I'm not taking credit. I think there's way more at play than just little old me. But had I let the kind of fear get in the way and had not actually put my music out there, created Home Studio Corner, reached out to Adam, the DJ, and saying, hey, I've got a show coming up. I'd love for you to come if you can make it. We haven't met in person yet. And then that starting up something that ended up leading to this. So it's just really fun. And I don't say it all to brag or boast or anything like that. To me, it's inspiring. An idiot like myself can get on the radio. That gives hope to all the other idiots in the world. So if you're an idiot like me, take heart. Idiots can get on the radio. Okay, I'm going to throw the whole playbook out the window, mainly because I spent way too long getting that video to work. If you were here on the live stream, which, by the way, we stream this live on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Central. If you were here, then you sat through about 20 minutes of me trying to figure out how to get the audio from that video into the session. It would come in, and then it was, anyway, the audio kept getting messed up on the import. Finally figured it out, but it took way too long. But thank you to all the live chat folks for not leaving and for hanging out, because you're awesome. So I'm going to jump in straight into your questions. We're not even going to do the boom section. I just deleted the boom right in front of your very eyes. We're not booming. No boom. We're boomless. You'll be fine. I think you'll be okay. So let's just jump right into your questions. So this is going to be kind of an all-question episode. So those of you in the live chat, I've got a few questions over in Facebook, but I need you to pony up your question game, because I really want this to be valuable for you. And if you happen to be in or near Nashville or can get here by Friday, November 18th, 2016, come to the show. It's a free show. They have good pizza. We can hang out. Let's make it a Home Studio Corner meetup / concert. I'm only playing 30, 40 minutes, so I'll have plenty of time for us to hang out. 7 p.m. I'm looking at you, Johnny Lipsham. Flights from Scotland for a free show. I mean, that seems like a good trade-off. I'm kidding. First question from Ben Holmes. Ben is from the UK, and he and I have been in communication a lot lately. He's working on a project and has hired me to critique some mixes. So he's hired me to master the project, which is cool. But in the meantime, while he's still working on mixes, he's also hired me to do critiques. So he's sending me the mixes. I can critique them, and then he can go back and make some changes, so that then when it comes time to master, he's had some more ears on it and had some extra feedback, which it seems to be working pretty well. I can hear the mixes improving from the feedback I'm giving. So that's really fun. If you'd like to hire me to do critiques on your mixes, that's absolutely something that I offer. So just hit me up via email, and I can tell you more about that. But Ben had a question. He said, can you give some advice on panning law? I understand what it does and have read online that 3 dB is a good basic setting, but what are your thoughts and settings? So I assume in Studio One that I can maybe adjust the panning laws, but I don't know, because I've literally never done it, never touched it, never cared about it. And so, yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because my system, I'm looking, I don't even see, at least in the settings that I can access while I'm recording, I don't even see anything about panning law. So I don't, it may be a thing. I know other DAWs allow you to change the panning law. And what that literally is talking about is changing the, I don't even really know. It's changing how pans work. If you pan something from the middle to the side, the difference in volume and things like that. I think that's what it means, but I honestly do not know the difference between them and what is standard. I would just, honestly, I would use whatever my system used and go with that. The other thing is, so here's, Tom's in the chat. He says, panning law says there's a 3 dB drop in audio level if you hard pan something left and right versus being in the center. So that's interesting. And then someone reminded me that there is a dual pan plugin that has the panning loss in it. So Studio One allows you to kind of circumvent whatever the built-in. So yeah, it's all like, looks like constant power, sine, cosine, square root, lots of crazy math stuff that I just don't care about at all. I'm not saying it's not valuable. It's just not something that I would focus on. To me, I get how panning things hard left and right would make it sound different volume-wise when you sum it to mono. But that's just a dance that I feel like we all have to play anyway, because whether it's actually a difference in volume or a perceived difference in volume, it's irrelevant. You still need your mix to sound good in mono versus stereo. So if you can change the global settings on a finished mix where there's a lot of hard panning and you can hear how it maybe makes one sound different than another, great. But to me, it's one of those really nerdy things that I promise you I will never research it and experiment with it, because I just don't think it's going to be that big of a difference to me. Not dogging your question. It may be like a game-changing thing, but I've just never actually done it. That was a long answer for way of me to say, I don't know. James says, do you have a list of your favorite books? I do. Well, not all of them, but a big chunk of books that I've read, mostly business related. You can find them still. I made an Amazon list a while back. It is an affiliate thing, so if you buy something, I get like a penny. But if you want to, fine. Go to joelikes.com/Amazon, and that'll take you to a list of, it's a little Amazon store type thing where there's just a list of my favorite books and things like that. Or some of the ones that I've read. I haven't filled it in lately, although I don't read as much now as I used to. I'm trying to think for myself more instead of have the book tell me what to think. Let's find more questions. I got some on Facebook. Let's grab those while we're at it. By the way, speaking of Facebook, if you're not connected with me there, a lot of good stuff goes down over there, and you are missing out. I would love for you to come find me. Just search my name or Joe Gilder Music, and you will find me, and we will be happy. Brett Conroy says, hey, Joe, I'm trying to get a home studio going to do remote drum session work and to work with local artists in the in the college town I live in. I have extensive experience in playing, but not in recording drums. If you could give your best bits of advice to help me out, what would they be? I already have mics, audio interface, and the gear necessary to actually record. Well, that's the biggest hurdle to get over, is being able to, like, physically having the equipment to capture all those inputs. So enough microphones, enough cables, enough stands, enough inputs on your audio interface to actually do the recording. So if you've already got that, that's great. I would say the next thing is, for me, if you don't have a ton of experience recording drums, I would probably, as best I can, try to stick to some tried and true things. I wouldn't dive into weird overhead techniques. I wouldn't dive into, doing just the kick drum and overhead mic and assuming that's going to work for everything. I would go with pretty standard, quote unquote, boring setup. Probably I still record pretty boring. So for me, my go-to is XY overheads, where the mics are right on top of each other, which minimizes a lot of phase issues. When you have them spread out wide, you can get a nice wide stereo image, but the problem is you tend to get a lot of phase issues where, there can be more weirdness there, and you don't always want weirdness. So I tend to like XY. It's not as wide, but it's very mono compatible. You fold it to mono, it sounds about the same, just not as wide, right? Then for me, top snare mic, kick drum mic at least, and then spot mics on the toms. To me, especially for the type of music I like to make, which is rock, I want a big, massive tom sound, and you're not going to get a big, massive tom sound out of the overheads usually. I like it to be like almost kick drum big, so I need mics on there. But usually I'm recording a 4-piece kit, so it's only 2 toms to worry about. If there's lots of toms, you have to figure out another creative solution. But for me, I would just tell the drummer, hey, just use 2 toms. It'll record better. That could be true because you only have 2 tom mics or whatever. Room mics I can do with or without if I've got the extra space and there's actually a room to use, then I'll throw a couple of room mics up. If it's a small room, like my room back there was no point in room mics because it would be like 2 feet away from the drummer. It's not much of a room. So I didn't do them the last time I had drums in here. But I would do a bottom snare mic if you can spare it. Sometimes that can add a lot of kind of brightness and just extra character to the snare. And if you can add a second kick drum mic that's more out from the kit, or I've got a couple videos on this, go search YouTube on my YouTube channel for the fat mic. That's what I've been doing with drums I've recorded here, where I'll take a ribbon mic and I'll put it about kick drum height, a little higher, and have it off the kick drum by a few feet. So it's mostly capturing kick, but it's also getting some snare. It's getting the rest of the kit, but it's just a very thick sounding mic. Blended in with the spot mics, it adds a little extra character and thickness that I kind of like. So that would be my go-to technique every time, and then adjust from there. If you have an extra mic for a hi-hat mic, depending on the song, that can be helpful. But that's really it. And of course, all of it needs to be recorded and listened back and make sure you're happy with the sound before you ever start doing takes. And that can take some time. It can take a couple hours to get drum sounds. That's okay. Set those expectations beforehand and make sure everyone knows that this is worth the time on the front end, and you'll be in good shape. But you're going to have some recordings that just go awful. Just know that ahead of time. You'll never be too good you'll never be so good that you won't have an occasional bad session. And starting out, you'll have more of them. That's just kind of how it goes. Lakshay from India says, what do you think about using automation in mastering? Like automating EQ, the compression threshold, etc. I haven't, obviously, you probably know this about me. I have mixed many more songs than I have mastered. However, I have mastered quite a few, and mastering, as far as client work, just straight, if it's mixing or mastering, it's probably about half and half of mastering versus mixing. So more and more building up my mastering chops the more and more client work that I do. So I will say I've only used automation in mastering maybe once or twice. And one of those times was because the recording was out of phase. He did that thing where he took one guitar, panned it left, duplicated it, panned it right, and then added a delay to the second one to make it sound stereo. And it does make it sound stereo, but it also makes it out of phase. So it may sound really cool to you, but if you're not used to it, you'll notice when you go back to mono, it disappears. Or if you pull it into your mastering software, you can look at the waveform or look at the phase meter and see that correlation thing going way in the negative because it's out of phase left to right. So I went into, it worked okay. I narrowed the mix just entirely, took a plugin to narrow just the width of the entire master. And then there was one section where it was just guitar where I literally had to bring it almost to mono to get it to sound not as phasey. And but I didn't want that for the whole song. So I literally automated the width plugin to change for that section of the song. I've automated limiters before, like the threshold to kind of have it hit a little harder. Sometimes I've automated volume, but for the most part, no, I don't tend to do that. I will if it needs it, but to me, a lot of the automation stuff, the song should be consistent from start to end. That's what I found. If it's a little muddy in the low mids, it's a little muddy in the low mids throughout. So that EQ move that I do is consistent throughout the song, because chances are I'm hearing something that the person who mixed it wasn't hearing, either because of their system didn't produce those frequencies with as much accuracy as you would like, or it could be just because he just isn't at an experience level where he heard that as a problem. I hear it as a problem and I fix it, and it tends to work across the entire deal. Let's see. Here's one from Smith. M. Smith says, when you're going for a lo-fi sound, where do you capture that sound? A recording stage, mix, master? I find that many effects are a bit cheesy. Any advice? It could be anything. It really depends on what you mean by lo-fi. And he's gives some examples of Shaky Graves, Beck, etc. Lo-fi to one person could mean something completely different. For me, a lot of times, when I'm thinking lo-fi, I'm thinking distortion. So adding distortion to a vocal is going to roll off the high frequencies and make it darker, which gives it a more lo-fi sound. It's going to make it sound distorted, obviously. If it's not super over-the-top distortion, it just almost like a warm drive. Sounds like you're hitting a console or some sort of piece of analog equipment and making it overdrive. So to me, that's a big part of it. It can certainly be the microphone. If you go with a dynamic, it's going to probably be more, quote, lo-fi sounding than a condenser. Rolling off lows and highs can give things a lo-fi sound. Whatever you mean by lo-fi, I don't know. You can use bit crushers. You can use all sorts of different things. To me, it can be overdone. I never want to hear another song where it starts off with this really lo-fi sounding mix and then it opens up into the full sound. I know that sounds cool, but it has been so overdone. I don't want to hear it. I've done it, and I just don't want to hear it anymore. So for me, I'm not looking for much lo-fi anyway. So maybe if I was, I'd probably have more to say about it. Isaac says, I believe Isaac's over in New Zealand, so he's listening to this tomorrow, which blows my mind. Says, any tips for recording bands with horn sections? I'm recording a big band and jazz combo soon. Live recording or overdubbing? I'd always start with live if they sound good and if they play in tune and things like that. Typically, the less mics, the better. The more mics you put on something, the more opportunities for phase issues. Maybe you can record sections at a time. That can be helpful. But really, I don't think horns are any more unique than a full band. If you had a rock band coming in, would you overdub? Would you do a live recording? It depends. What does the band want to do? Are they good enough to do it live? Can you pull it off with the equipment that you have? All those things. I will say brass instruments tend to sound good to my ears with ribbon mics or dynamic mics. A lot of times condensers, either they get overloaded more easily or there's too much brightness and horns are harsh anyway. So if I can tame that harshness with mic choice, I'll usually do that. Tiki says, any experience doing voiceover or dialogue editing? If so, talk about workflow. The only voiceover that I have done is this podcast and the other podcast I do with Graham Cochran, the Simply Recording podcast. This one, obviously, you can see, you can watch me create this live. I don't do any editing. So I literally just record it. Now, I do use compressor, EQ, gate, expander, and limiter on my voice. Actually, I don't even know if I use a compressor anymore. I found compressor on spoken word I always hear the compression, versus limiting I usually don't. So I usually just increase the volume into the limiter until I get the level that I want, and it usually sounds natural, but it gets me nice and loud. Compressor, attack, release, all that stuff tends to just mess with stuff to my ears. But I do think one of the most important parts of doing dialogue voiceover stuff is figuring out a great way to use a gate expander to cut down on room noise in between phrases. You don't want to remove it entirely. That can sound weird, and I think we talked about that in a recent episode. But removing it some so that when I stop talking, you don't hear everything in my room. It gets turned down a little bit, which that's how you're experiencing my voice right now. When I stop to swallow or take a breath, the microphone turns down. There's a gate or an expander on there that does that. So getting really good at setting those is super helpful. As far as like editing it down, they mess up and you're trying to figure out timing stuff. I think listening to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks will help you get an ear for the cadence. That's usually typical of a professional audiobook, professional thing like that. Otherwise, that's about all I can speak to on that. Giuliano says, we've seen your studio change a lot through the years. How do you feel about your setup now? Well, as with probably like most guitarists and pedal boards and whatnot, it's always in a state of change and flux to a degree. Obviously, I've moved a lot since I started Home Studio Corner. When I first started Home Studio Corner, I have moved 5 times since then in 7 years. So I've had to set up in apartments and in rental houses and in different homes and different size rooms. So hopefully, if you've been around for a while, you've seen a lot of those different rooms as well. And this one I really like. It's separate from the rest of the house. So I literally, the only way my kids can run in is if they go outside and come to this door over here and come in. So that's kind of nice with small kids. It's also fairly separated, so I can be pretty loud and no one else in the house can hear it, but I'm still a part of the house. And I do have a separate room now. I like that a lot. I don't use it all the time. For example, last night, a friend of mine was coming to record mandolin for a project. I didn't feel like setting up the headphone mix in there and being in separate rooms because we were just recording on a couple songs and I just wanted to hang out. So he just sat on the couch behind me, which, by the way, check out the blue couch. That's new. It's not new. We've had it in our house and Pam didn't want it anymore. Didn't work with her design flow. So I stole it and I'm digging it. So, so gear-wise, workflow-wise, I like the way it's set up right now. It gets a little hot in here. This is kind of fun. There is no actual air conditioner vent in this room. There's a vent in that bathroom that blows this way. So it gets hot in the summer, cold in the winter. I should probably fix that at some point, but I haven't. But yeah, I dig the space. I think there's plenty of room. I like the look of this room a little bit better. It feels a little more vibey, especially at night. There's not a lot of lights in here, so it just has a nice dark vibe to it. Sherry, what's up, Sherry? She's a VIP member, and I just lost your comment because everything jumped. Hold on. Where'd you go? There you are. Do you remember how you got that far? How you got that far in the back drum sound at the beginning of Where Are You Now from Mix Practice? Good question. So Where Are You Now? If you go listen to that song, if you don't have any of my albums, you can go listen to it for free over at joegildermusic.com on the album Better This Way. Go click on the Where Are You Now song. You'll hear it. The intro is electric guitar, fingerstyle, really chill. And then I wanted this just light drum part throughout the first verse. And so Tim played it with these felt mallets. I think they were like leather. And so he hit the toms, goo, goo. So by themselves, when you hear the tracks, and Sherry, you've got the tracks, you know what I'm talking about, it doesn't sound nearly as big as it does in the final mix. So I had to do a lot, actually. So there's a separate reverb I set up just for those toms. So I EQ'd the toms to where they got a lot of low end, and then I sent them to a huge, I think it was a plate reverb, and then I EQ'd the reverb to let a lot of low end through. So he hits, goo, and then this rumble kind of happens through the reverb. I wouldn't normally like that in any sort of mix, but in this one, it's just an electric guitar, vocal, and those tom hits, and it worked pretty well. I love, if you want a big, long reverb, to me, it doesn't get any better than a nice plate reverb. You don't get any room reflections. You don't get any of that weird bouncy sound that you can get with cheaper room reverbs. It just gets a big, long tail on it. I find myself using that more and more when I need just a big ambient type deal. Good question, though. Any thoughts on recording a small acoustic setup to get a live vibe? How to use acoustics to your advantage? Oh, recording in a small acoustic setup. 2 guys, acoustic guitar, harmonica, and vocal in a home studio. So what's your question? How to use acoustics for your advantage if you're going to record all of them? I don't know. I think we tend to obsess over recording things really cleanly to the point of where we will overdub everything and never have 2 musicians playing together at once. I'm not saying that's bad. I've done plenty of projects like that. You can certainly still get a good recording out of it. But, sorry, I got distracted. But I think there's, obviously, we all would agree that there is something special about musicians being in a room together playing their instrument. And for me, I like to explore more of that, even at the expense of there being bleed and not being able to do lots of takes and having to kind of really force the musicians to play well. To me, that's a good trade-off. So, one thing I would do is I'd still try to have some separation. So like in this room, I would probably put one guitar over there facing this way and another guitar way over there facing this way. So facing each other with mics probably a little bit closer than normal so that we get a little more of the guitar, a little less of everything else. But I want them to be able to see each other if possible. And then what else was in your question? 2 guys, acoustic guitar, harmonica, and a vocal. So it sounds like probably the guys with guitars would have harmonicas too. So I would put a mic on the guitars angled down, so it's angled away from their voice, and then a mic on the vocal angled up towards the voice. So you'll get pretty good separation between guitar and vocal. Having them on opposite sides of the room will help as well. As far as using acoustics to your advantage, if you've got the inputs, you could always record a couple of room mics, and that might add more of a live vibe. What you'll find is when you record live stuff, it almost always sounds more dead than you thought it did. When you go back and listen, it'll be, even though everything was recorded live, it's still fairly dead and isolated. So you'll end up probably adding some sort of room reverb over the entire thing anyway to make it sound real. So if you can accomplish that by recording a couple of room mics, that might be worth doing. But it's all experimentation. Try different things and see which ones work for you. Johnny says, what are your thoughts on gain staging as it relates to the input, quote, sweet spot for plugins? I just don't care. First of all, the idea of the plugins emulate consoles, which tended to sound best with a certain level of signal coming through them. So an SSL plugin might sound a little sweeter if you send it through at negative 18 dB versus negative 26 dB or something like that. I'm sure it's true. It's really hard to quantify that, first of all. Like, actually, can you really compare the two? Because one's louder than the other anyway, so you'd have to run something through there, record that, normalize it, run it through at a different volume, and then normalize that and compare the two. My guess is they'd sound different but good, So that's part of it. Secondly, I don't use any third-party plugins right now, so I'm using all PreSonus Studio One stock stuff. So if it sounds better at certain points, I just don't know, and I just don't care. To me, I'm always mixing with my ears. So if I don't feel like I'm missing anything, then if I can get what's in my head to come out of the speakers, I've won. Whether I did that by using proper gain staging or not is somewhat irrelevant. I mean, you could easily have someone do a proper mix that's boring and someone do it wrong that's really engaging and interesting for the listener. I'm going to want the wrong one every time. So I think there's certainly, I probably err on the side of going too simplistic on this answer and probably missing out on opportunities for cool sounds that I'm not getting otherwise. But I really, really despise getting bogged down in stuff that doesn't matter. I still do it. I spent all afternoon yesterday researching video cameras, and I don't need one really. So I can get bogged down just like anybody, but I don't want to make myself more bogged down, if that makes sense. Bylonic says, do you mix commercial stuff with Easy Mix plugins? Well, I just said I don't use any third-party plugins. Easy Mix, I don't love the idea. The plugin itself might be cool and might get you good tones, but the way they market it, at least the way they did, was very much like, now you can get a Pro Mix to just slap the Easy Mix plugin on there and tell it to do the vocal setting, and it'll make your vocal sound amazing. It might improve the vocal sometimes. It might make it sound good sometimes. But this is a human game, right? It's kind of like saying, here's this new piece of software that will write a song. You just tell it what theme you want the song to be about and a couple of words you'd like in the song, and it will write something for you. It may technically write a song, but I don't think it's going to be something I'm going to want to listen to. And if it is, great, but I'd still would prefer to write the song myself, flawed though it may be, than have a computer write a perfect song. The thing is, I don't think you're going to get a perfect mix with Easy Mix plugins. I think they can be great for the musician who has no interest in learning how to mix, wants to record, slap some presets on there so it sounds halfway decent so they can shop it around and send it out to people to hear what their songs sound like. But for someone who's actually trying to learn how to mix, I don't think it helps at all. That's me. I can be wrong, but I don't like the idea of something making it where you just push a button and it does the work for you. I mean, how many times does that really work in real life? Real life, right? I can't think of a time where that works. Aaron says, I can't make doubled, delayed, hard, distorted guitars work. It sounds weird. Is there a way to make it work? I don't know what you mean by double, delayed, hard, distorted guitars. I don't typically double something with a delay on there. If you're talking about you record it twice and both times there's a delay plugin, that can work, but the delay adds an extra layer of stuff that could be off. So if the timing's off a little bit between two guitars, it can still sound kind of okay in stereo. But if there's a delay there, now you've got the timing was off when he hit the note, and now the timing's off on the delay repeats as well. So I probably wouldn't go about it that way. Now, if you're talking about taking a single guitar and duplicating it and delaying it to get stereo, that will never, ever sound good. That's a bit extreme, but I've never experienced a situation where that worked really well. It's way easier and way better just to record it twice, and you have two actual performances that you then pan left and right. Works better every single time. And if you can't play it consistently twice, then you need to figure out something else to do in the arrangement, because doubling the guitar is not going to happen for you. Let's see. Lakshay says, nope, I already answered that one. Do you automate your vocals before or after compression? Well, automation as far as the actual fader automation always happens after. If you're asking if I do it before or after I apply compression, it's almost always after. Usually it's one of the last things I do if I automate is I'm taking the finished vocal tone and I'm just automating it up or down. That said, I do a lot of clip gain stuff, which I talked about in a recent episode, where if the vocal's too quiet on, the third phrase of the chorus, I'll usually go in and chop that up and turn up the actual audio file itself. So in that sense, I'm sort of automating before compression. So I guess you could say I do both. No, I don't know what Marshall code is, Jow. Sorry. Says here's one from Egbert. Says, I have hard-panned, double-tracked guitars disappear in mono. Am I just losing that 3 dB on all four guitars then? If they disappear, that's interesting. It could be a couple things. First of all, it could be you just need 2 instead of 4. It could be that you recorded them so similarly tone-wise that they're kind of canceling each other out like phase-wise. I've had that happen for me. I tend to sing pretty consistently, so there are times when my doubled lead vocal is so similar to the one I just recorded that it sounds weird. Instead of doubled, it just sounds like phasey. So that maybe that's what's happening. If that's the case, I would try, for me, doubled stuff, occasionally with electric guitar, I'll double something, just the exact same part with the exact same tone, and that can work. But that can get boring and old really quick. If you do that times 4, you've got 4 of the same thing. So of course it's probably going to do some weird stuff when you collapse it to mono. So for me, more often than not, I like to have the first part be my 335 with like a blues driver tone. Great. And then if I want a doubled tone, I may try to just double that because I've got the guitar right there. If that's not working, then I'll get a different guitar, maybe a Telecaster through a blues driver, a Telecaster through like some sort of tube screamer style distortion, and then those will blend better, or those will at least go better because they're not the exact same tone. Those are things I'm looking into. As far as it disappearing in mono, it could just be you need to turn them up, and they'll be louder in stereo, but they'll come out more in mono. Or it could just be that you're going to lose them in mono because it's 4 guitars and a big rock mix that you're just not going to hear everything in a dense rock mix in mono. It should all still sound good and still have impact, but it obviously isn't going to sound as good. That's kind of the point. So many ways to mic acoustic guitar, says Paul Lucas. What are the advantages or disadvantages of stereo versus mono, large diaphragm versus small, and ribbon versus condenser or dynamic? Great question. Paul, if you go to my website and search for acoustic guitar stereo, you'll see I've got 2 articles. One is about why you should record stereo, and the other one's about why you shouldn't. I'll summarize here. The case for recording in stereo is if it's a solo acoustic thing, then sometimes stereo makes sense because you're getting some width that you wouldn't get otherwise. So if it's one guitar and that's it, or it's just one guitar and a vocal, that one guitar being wider can be nice. Otherwise, I vote for mono every time, especially if it's going to be a bigger mix. If you've got a big rock mix, there's no reason to record it in stereo. You're not going to hear the stereo sound. You're just going to end up hearing it as a mono instrument anyway, so why not record with one microphone? Also, if you record with 2 microphones, you might actually not really pay attention to either, and so neither one will sound that great. And then they may sound okay together, but not good individually. And when it folds to mono, you may notice there are phase issues and things like that. All that can happen in stereo. So for me, I have not recorded stereo acoustic guitar in years, and I don't think I'm missing out because of it. What I like to do is record more than one acoustic guitar. So a doubled part, or lately I've been doing like 3 acoustic guitars on acoustic stuff. So there's one part up the middle, a different part on the left, and a different part on the right. Different chords, different capos, different tuning sometimes, and blending all those together. To me, that's way wider than 2 mics on a single guitar. Because a guitar, as cool as it is, it's still a mono instrument. It's fair. I mean, it's got a little bit of width, but it's essentially a single point thing. So you're not going to get miracle stuff with stereo. Dapper Dan, what's your opinion on copyright before releasing? I don't. I just release it. I'm not worried about making money off of copyright. I'm worried about selling my music. And if someone copies it, cool. Really. Great. I mean, I can prove that I made it before they copied it, but even then, royalties are not the way people are going to make a living in the music industry in the next 20 years. So I would not be too concerned about it. Should you do it? Sure. Should you register with ASCAP, BMI, CSAC? Yeah, absolutely. It's just not something I focus on. Pete in Australia says, what's your current go-to setup for recording just simple acoustic guitar and vocals? So what I just said about acoustic guitar is still true. If you want to record them at the same time, what I said earlier about facing one microphone down and one microphone up really gets you a lot of separation. So vocal mic a little below and pointed up. The other mic a little bit up and pointed down, so they're each pointing away from the thing you're trying to get minimal bleed out of. That's the way I would do it. If you saw the acoustic show that I did last week on Wednesday, that's how I mic'd it up. And if you go in solo, one or the other, you can hear it. Actually, there's a pretty good bit of separation, even though legitimately it's only like a few inches between my voice and my guitar. I was able to get decent separation that way. Try both. Sometimes you just get a better performance by recording acoustic and vocal at the same time, even though it potentially hurts the mix because there's a little more bleed and you can't do quite as much. It's totally worth it if it gets you a better recording. Oh, so many good questions, but I've got to go. My voice is running out of steam. You know what? That'll be it. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed to my email newsletter, you can do that at Home Studio Corner. Don't forget about Mix Practice. Don't forget about Mix Together, which is a free YouTube series where I'm mixing a song. You can get those tracks for yourself over at homestudiocorner.com and join me. It's a lot of fun. I gotta go. See ya.